Our journey thus far has taken us deep into some of the big questions that Christians and unbelievers often ask in regards to Christian faith. And hopefully, along the way, you have been not only encouraged and strengthened in your own faith, but also feel more equipped to defend the faith to those who may ask. As we enter into this last session, I want us to think about Jesus' mandate in Matthew chapter 22 for Christians to love God with all of their heart, their soul, and their mind. This is the greatest commandment according to Christ, summarizing the entirety of what the Bible is teaching us. In essence, Jesus is saying, love God with your entire being. In other words, don't compartmentalize your Christian life. Don't fall to the extreme where you are found loving God with only your affections, your heart, but fail to love Him with your mind as well, nor vice versa. No, love God with your entire being, mind and heart included, and let that love flow into fulfilling the second commandment of loving our neighbor as ourselves. In my own personal experience with apologetics, however, there can be a gap between these sides. The side of being personally encouraged and strengthened by these reasons and evidences, and the side of being able to communicate those reasons and evidences to those around me. It is easy to become so consumed with the reasons we have for our Christian beliefs to the point to where we neglect to share those reasons with those within our lives. Apologetics isn't an intellectual hobby geared toward those who like to think. No, apologetics is a tool to be used in the hands of every Christian in order to make much of Jesus in the way a person thinks, lives, and communicates with others. It isn't something to be kept hidden and brought out only when one needs a little intellectual pick-me-up to their faith. It is something that should be broadcasted to the world in a loving and winsome manner. With that in mind, we're going to look at one last question. Where do we go from here? How do we use the things that we have learned and have been encouraged by in our conversations with others? What is the best manner to communicate these truths to those around us? In essence, how do we live our lives apologetically? For our final big question, I turned once more to Dr. J.P. Moreland, Distinguished Professor of Philosophy at Biola University. We have sort of covered numerous apologetic topics over the course of this study.
Yes.
And now we're just sort of wrapping things up. We're going to be asking sort of the question, where do we go from here? How now shall we live with sort of all of this information that we've covered? And sort of how does it sort of change our hearts? How do we internalize it to motivate us to be on mission with God?
Well, I think these are just exactly the right questions to be asked at the end of this series. So let's dive in and see where we can go.
Excellent. So the first question I want to ask you is about a book that you wrote years ago. And it's a book that challenged me, that challenged generations who have read it. So the title of the book is Loving God with All Your Mind. Now, obviously, you're kind of borrowing from Jesus and the greatest commandment, thou shalt love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind. Why write a book singling out just one aspect of that, the mind?
Yes. I looked at American culture and I saw that Christians were afraid to share their faith. They were cowering in ingrown churches, and that the culture was becoming increasingly secular and hostile to Christianity. It was because Christians didn't know what they believed or why they believed it. Studies have been done that have indicated that high school students who graduate from our finest churches and go to college may know a little bit about what they believe, but they've never been taught why they should believe it and how to defend it. And as a result of that, Andy, we were just not making an impact in journalism, in the sciences, in high school and public education. And I knew it was because Christians did not think that learning to think well was a part of being a disciple. Whereas for the centuries of the church, believers thought that part of discipleship, not all of it, but part of it was learning to think very well because Jesus was smart and I should try to be smart like he was and do my best to have a Christian worldview. So I never believed that the mind is all there is. My goodness, we need to have very tender hearts. My will needs cultivation so I can do the right thing when I need to. It's a whole package. But why leave the mind out? Isn't it important to learn to think as a Christian and be able to talk to folk about why we believe what we believe? That was why I wrote the book.
So, Dr. Moreland, students today, just like in every generation,
Yes.
are asking the big questions about life. Sometimes these questions sort of just change the way that they're asked, but the topics pretty much stay the same. So how can doing apologetics help students and ground them and thinking about these questions?
Well, the first thing we have to remember is what apologetics is. Apologetics is a ministry of caring for people, and it means learning how to give reasons for why we believe in Christianity and learning how to answer questions that people raise against Christianity. But it is not about getting into arguments or trying to win an argument. Of course, we give arguments if that means that we give evidence and reasons for why we believe Jesus rose from the dead or abortion is wrong or something of that sort. But it is not about getting into these knockdown, drag out, I'm smarter than you are, or anything. In fact, what this tells us is that if a person really doesn't want to listen, then just bless them and move on to someone else. Because if a person doesn't want help, there's nothing you can do to help them. Seeing apologetics as a ministry of caring for people also lets me off the hook not to have to know everything. Because if my job is to care for somebody and they ask me a question I don't know, then I can always say, man, that's a great question. Let me write it down, say it again, and give me a week or so and I'll see if I can find an answer for you because I'd like to be of help. Now, apologetics then takes the pressure off of us to be answer men or answer women and know all the answers. But it does place an obligation on us to try to find answers. So when people ask the big questions, is there meaning to life? Is there life after death? Do I have a soul or am I just my brain? Is there a supreme being? And what is that supreme being like? How do we know what's right and wrong and what's the best way to live? Apologetics will help us be able to present thoughtful, intelligent, wise answers to those questions so people, when they leave us, actually have something to think about. And one of the great benefits of that is it gives a person a confident, settled faith where they're not unstable and worried, gosh, I wonder if this is really true. Because, you know, we're all going to face times in life where we go through pain. We lose a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or a parent dies, or they get divorced, or we get a disease or get sick. And during those times, we can go through a valley where God may seem very distant. And if your faith is based upon your feelings, those will not be enough to sustain you in those dark times. But if you actually know that there are good reasons to believe in God and you have some evidence as to why you believe that Jesus rose from the dead and was the Son of God, then those reasons can come back to you and say, wait a minute, even though I'm hurting and I'm not feeling God's presence, I know He's there because of this, that, and the other reason. And so apologetics can give a sense of strength and stability and confidence to someone.
Now, I think that we would both agree that obviously apologetics in terms of defending the faith isn't the end-all be-all of the Christian life, but living the Christian life and loving God with our entire being, heart, soul, and mind However, how can apologetics help students to better live the Christian life? Can you think of any reasons?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. Um, when you go to college, you're in an environment where there are all kinds of worldviews and ideas that are being thrown at you. There are all kinds of temptations to lower your morals and to do various things that you'll regret when you get older. And what you want to do is to become a man or woman of very, very deep character. I want to be a man where my wife says to people, I'm so proud to have him as a husband. And my children say, man, my dad is the greatest in the world because of the character that I have. I think we'd all like that. How do you get there? Well, there are a lot of ways, but one of the most important ways is you set a life goal to learn more and more about what Christianity teaches about these very important issues. And you learn why you believe them and how to defend them. And what that does is it strengthens and stabilizes you for the journey over the long haul. So apologetics is a very, very great resource. Imagine a Christian, Andy, going to college and all the smart people that he or she meets think Christianity's stupid. They ridicule it. And you see that in retreat, and you retreat to your emotions and to your worship music and the connection in your small group study in your dorm room. Now that's all important, but there's going to be something deep down in you where you're going to say, why do all the smart people think this is stupid? Well, the truth of the matter, all the smart people don't think it's stupid. There are as many smart people who believe Christianity as don't, or more perhaps, but the student doesn't know that. So the student needs to find answers to the questions the professors are raising so they don't have to hunker down and have this gnawing doubt deep in their heart. Gee, I wonder if this stuff is all really true after all.
Yeah. And I think, also, I mean, today we seem to compartmentalize our lives. For instance, we think that sort of faith and our beliefs in regards to our faith, we just sort of put them down to the level of opinion and value, whereas, this is reality over here. This is sort of fact-based, the things I experience and even science and stuff like that. We've talked about that. But so we had this sort of separation, this dichotomy, and it seems like apologetics would help in that way. Do you think so?
Oh, again, you've put your finger on a crucial problem. Because you will not base your life on things that you just take to be opinions. You will actually base your life on things you think you know. And I will tell you that you can actually know that God is real. You can know that the New Testament is reliable history, and so on and so forth. But in order to do that, you've got to study and read in the field of apologetics, and what that can do is to give you a strong basis on which to continue to grow, sometimes in a culture that's not very friendly to what we believe. But if you think that your Christian beliefs are just sort of these opinions that you hold because you like them, they're not going to be enough to sustain you the older you get.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not going to be life-changing.
They're not going to be life-changing.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about different topics over the course of the study and thinking through lots of big questions, but we haven't talked a lot about how can we, or how should we, be able to articulate these things to our unbelieving friends and family members. So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you encourage students who are just learning apologetics, maybe for the first time? Obviously, there is a tendency probably for some people to just go out there and just dump everything that they've learned onto someone who they're trying to witness to. But that's probably not the best route. But what is a more loving route? How can we speak truth in a loving way into the lives of others?
Well, first we have to remember that my job is not to try to convince that person against their will. That's God's job. My job is to try to help them and serve them, and to try to provide information that might overcome a problem in their mind. So if I go home for Thanksgiving and that atheistic uncle's there, and he makes a point against the faith and raises some kind of a point, I think the best thing to do is to not get in his face, but to say, well, you know, Uncle Joe, I actually see it a little differently. And would you mind if I took a few minutes here to tell you kind of how I see it and why? Would that be okay with you? And if he keeps interrupting you, well, then you know that he really doesn't want help on this. He just wants to get in the fight. And if that's the case, then I think I would just gracefully bow out. We're not interested in trying to get in fistfights with people, metaphorically speaking. We're interested in having thoughtful conversations where I listen to you and I give you, Mr. Atheist, a chance to tell me exactly why you think the way you do, and I'll listen, I really will. But then I think it's fair that you would listen to me. The second thing to remember is that you don't have to know all the answers. You should have studied, and there are some great books to read and some videos to watch. This series is one of them. You should take time to inform yourself about the evidence that's out there. And I'm so glad to be a part of this, because this is one way to do that. So you go with some equipping, but you're not a PhD in, you know, history or something, and you're a 19-year-old or 17-year-old, and you just do the best you can. Yeah. And so you go, and if you get asked a question, you have all the permission in the world to say, man, that's a good question. I don't have a clue. Ask it again. You write it down, and you go find somebody or a book or something that might answer it, and you go back a week later and give them help or email them. Yeah. So the pressure's really not on you.
Right.
You're trying to have civil conversations with people where you listen to one another. Now, Andy, don't you think it'd be a good idea if they were also thoughtful conversations? And apologetics helps them to be a little bit more thoughtful.
When it comes to living apologetically in our world today as followers of Christ, it is important to have a healthy notion of what constitutes success. For starters, there is no easy recipe for having successful outcomes in our apologetic conversations with others. Oftentimes, the goal is just to have them and help the person that we are talking with overcome as many intellectual obstacles to faith that they can, while also at the same time planting as many seeds of the gospel that we can as well. While we would love to make disciples of each and every unbeliever we speak with, the reality of that taking place isn't likely. Conversion and discipleship aren't things that normally happen in one or two conversations, nor do they come about through even our best reasons and evidences. Don't forget, they come about through the work of the Holy Spirit in the life of that person. Yes, God does use us and our feeble efforts, but the results are that of the divine work of God in transforming the heart of a person. Doing apologetics can be difficult work, but that isn't something that should come as a surprise. In essence, we are challenging people to think about their core beliefs and at times graciously telling them that they should abandon their worldview for the Christian worldview. That can be a lot for a person to take in. They have been living in their worldview for quite some time, like a house that they lived in for decades and they know every square inch of and where everything is at. We are suggesting that they relocate to a house and neighborhood to which they have no knowledge. Nobody likes to move and be uprooted from everything that is familiar to them, which is why the supernatural work of God in the hearts of people is necessary for genuine transformation to take place. While doing apologetics as a student, make it your goal to simply get people thinking about their own beliefs and whether there are good reasons for why they hold them. And in turn, allow opportunity for you to present why you believe what you believe as a Christian. By allowing them the chance to speak, not only are you given credibility as a person who actually cares about them, but you are able to be in a better position of helping that person see any inconsistencies within their own beliefs. Don't be overwhelmed with wondering whether you are going to say the wrong thing. Remain humble and kind to those you speak with, and take heart and gain confidence in knowing that the Christian worldview isn't the product of human invention or your own effort and imagination, but is the revelation of God Himself.